we went to Dave and Buster's. We did our whole thing, and I was like 75% present with her.
How much time did you lose because of that? Like, how much internal time did you lose because of that? I've created a pattern in which I do not trust myself to take on the challenge of the thing that I avoided. That erosion of trust over time increases the anxiety.
Gary Vaynerchuk, he'll say, you know, I get up every day and I'm ready and willing for everything to go wrong that day. And I do that every single day. You know, like I'm anticipating it's going to go wrong.
I remember she said to me, man, I feel like I've done more work in the past 2 weeks than I've done in the past 20 years of therapy.
Wow.
What's up, guys? No Nonsense Podcasts. Your host, Eric Uresk. SOLOCAST today with super producer Max.
Hello.
It's my version of Brian Redband.
Yeah. I like it. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah, he had a good run, right?
Yeah. I had a great run.
Yeah, so today, guys, I just wanted to have a conversation about something that I write about a lot and something that I think about a lot in my work, both, you know, in my own journey and in my work with clients and people, right, is the relationship between avoidance and anxiety and how it's actually really more of a vicious cycle, right? And so the way that I look at this cycle is there's usually the thing that I want to avoid, I would say that comes first, right? So the avoidance, the thing I want to avoid comes first. And then there may be anxiety around the thing that I want to avoid, right? And so I avoid it. When I avoid that, whatever it is, I've created a pattern in which I do not trust myself to take on the challenge of the thing that I avoided, okay? That erosion of trust over time increases the anxiety, which then just circles back and we increase the avoidance, and it just continues and continues, possibly.
Becomes a pattern.
Becomes a pattern, becomes a cycle, becomes a way of living.
Yep.
And oftentimes it becomes so entrenched, right, that, and I'll see this a lot with clients around really like visceral, deep-seated fears and traumas that they have. It becomes a boogeyman.
Yep.
Right? That the fear of actually stopping long enough to look at the thing becomes more terrifying than anything. What invariably gets found is once the courage and safety is created in order for the person to look at whatever they need to look at, what was most of the time under there is not nearly as scary as what they were thinking it was going to be.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, and then later on, it almost becomes like a blessing that you went through the pain of that. Yeah, I mean, I was just telling you before we started that, I mean, I think any growth could be tied into the avoidance, anxiety kind of cycle. And like, for me, like, you know, you got the childhood trauma, and then when your brain is not developed, you don't, you know, like you don't really, as a kid, especially, you take other like adults' words for things. Somebody says something to you.
That's a fact.
It's a fact. So, and if you don't, you know, you don't have the knowledge to be like, well, is that true? Like, where's the evidence? You know, you're not there yet. And if those things go unchecked, which most of the times they do, especially back when we were kids, like nobody gave a shit about that stuff.
Yeah, we couldn't fact check nothing.
Right. Then, you know, they just sort of, they build in. And so like some of the patterns for me is, you know, and especially like being a sober guy, which I also had that stacked against me, that I was just kind of a self-loathing person without really any reasoning behind it, to start. But, you know, avoiding confrontation, that's a big one for me, because I feel like if somebody rejects me, like, you know, for example, like I just had a conversation with a client last week, and, you know, there was a big miscommunication in what was going on, and that was partly on me because I didn't explain everything. I didn't take the time to explain everything. But before I sent over this thing I was working on, you know, they were pressing me for it, and I was like, I'm too scared to say, hey, look, you know, I've been busy, I'm working on it, but we're not quite there yet. This is not a final product, and explain it. So I was like, okay, like, here you go, like, check this out, let me know. And I shot something over. And then I talked to her about it, and she's like this is not what I wanted. And it was just like this confrontational thing. And when I'm sitting there, and when she was like, I want to talk to you about this, right there, I was like, where's the back door? Can I find a way out of this? You know what I mean? And so I was talking to her about it, and like, you know, I'm sitting there, my heart's pounding, and she's giving me feedback, which is constructive.
Right.
But to me, you're rejecting me.
Right.
If you're saying what you sent over is subpar and I don't like it, and this, that, and the other thing, like regardless of who's right or wrong, right there, immediately I take that as you're a piece of shit.
Right.
I don't like you.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell everybody that this guy's no good.
Right.
And, you know, initially what ended up like I stuck that conversation. I was like, oh, totally. Think there was a miscommunication. I understand clearly. I'm going to go ahead and get this fixed up for you. It took me 2 days. I sent something back over. She's like, this is perfect. This is great. I'm so happy we worked this. And everything was great.
Right.
And but I built this boogeyman around having to sit through that discomfort. And I remember like I went with my daughter, and for the rest of the day, we went to Dave and Buster's. We did our whole thing. And I was like 75% present with her.
How much time did you lose because of that? Like, how much internal time did you lose because of that?
Dude, almost 24 hours.
Okay. So let's go back a minute, because this is perfect, right? So there's a fear of the conflict, right? So a disagreement, right? And it's not just the conflict; it's the discomfort that I'm going to feel in conflict.
Yes,
is that fair?
Exactly.
Right? Okay. So I'm anticipating a discomfort,
right?
That the discomfort that I'm anticipating is more likely based off my early past.
100%.
Right? Okay. So I'm taking my past discomfort, right? And I'm bringing it into the present moment that has nothing to do with that, right?
Yep.
Unconsciously, most of the time, right?
Totally.
Okay. And I am actually creating my past and my present, right? So my past is influencing my present, not just influencing it, but it's here. I'm experiencing that past again in this very new moment, right? Because I'm not present to the fact that this is actually this could be a bunch of different things, right? I'm assuming I'm coming in with a story, and then I experience this thing all this time until I actually talk to the person, right? So my fear kept me from communicating clearly, right? Which would have avoided the conflict.
That would have avoided the whole thing in the first place.
Okay, so because I was afraid, I wanted to avoid just communicating at all. Okay, so I don't communicate clearly. Now,
which is a people-pleasing thing, by the way.
Which is a people-pleasing thing,
Absolutely.
right? I'm just going to put off the conflict until I have to deal with it, right?
And then I'm going to deliver perfectly what they want. Everything's perfect.
Yeah. And then I didn't communicate clearly, so she is left with an assumption that this is the finished product.
Yes.
Right? And
which it was never meant to be.
Which it was never meant to be.
But I didn't communicate that clearly. Yep, totally.
So just like, man, if that's not like just a perfect real-world example of how that can create our entire life.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is a business relationship. Okay. I may or may not. I may work with this person for months. I may work with them for years. I may work with them for one project. Right. I'm not in a necessarily an ongoing relationship with them all day, every day. Right. Okay. What happens when it's a boss? What happens when it's a significant other? And we're just stockpiling this shit up,
dude. Yeah. I mean, I had one of the bosses that I worked for who leveled me up considerably. Like, this guy taught me more about business in, the 4 years I worked for him than any school, like because he was hard on me. But let me tell you, every Monday I used to have a meeting, a one-on-one meeting with him. And he was like, no bullshit. Give me the I don't want excuses. Like, this dude was pretty hardcore. And I used to dread all through the weekend, like, oh man, like Monday is gonna suck. Like, I built this catastrophize, and so like in my mind, like I'm going up there and like like we're on this like creaky pirate ship, and I'm gonna like get into his office, and he's gonna be behind like yar, you're gonna be thrown off the boat, like building up this whole scenario of how everything I'm doing is wrong. I'm an imposter. This guy's gonna figure out that I don't know shit,
right?
And I would like prepare and like go up there, lay it all out, and 99% of the time he was like, this looks great. You're doing a great job. And then I would leave and like be like, what was I so scared about? The interesting thing is, didn't just happen. Like, it wasn't like, oh, all right, okay, this is cool. Like, he reacted good because that subconscious tape, you know, from building up avoidant behavior like that over years, right? And this guy's an authority over me. Like, he signs my checks. And so, but what ended up happening there is over time, I built up resentment because I felt like I was unable, like if something was unfair, I don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
I don't want to say anything. I don't want to have him call.
And that's what happens too, right? People like, this isn't just about like, okay, having these conversations and stuff like that. This is about people give up their authenticity. They give up their boundaries.
It's me all over.
They're so afraid of fucking conflict that they forego any type of boundaries, any type of speaking into what authentically like works for them in a relationship. And so you might find yourself if like in these really one-sided relationships, right? It can look so many different ways. This avoidance can look so many different ways. It can look at, sometimes avoidance can look like the exact opposite. It could look like just blowing up on people for giving you criticism.
Because it's been pent up for so long.
Or just, it feels like an attack, right? Because I'm basing I want to avoid the feeling that I have of the criticism inside. It probably reminds me of something that's really painful to me. And so it's easier for me to just blow up on you so that it doesn't happen again. So you have people that live their entire lives. They've made everybody so scared of them, and they've chosen these people around them very specifically, right? So that nobody can bring any type of criticism or constructive feedback into their world because it is too hard for them to be with that. That is so uncomfortable, right? And so they can use those intimidation tactics to set up their entire world where they've got like nobody, they've got yes men around them.
Yeah, and that's the thing is this guy, no matter, and I was open with him about it. He's like, look, I pay you to think. I don't want a yes man.
Yeah,
I'm gonna give you feedback.
He's a good guy.
Oh, he was. And to be honest with you, like I grew leaps and bounds with this stuff because he forced me to do it.
Yeah,
you know, he's like, if you want to work here, this like you, if I say something, don't just. Oh, okay, yeah, we'll do that. You know, but you know, come at me with whatever you have. I might still be like, no, I don't like that. We're gonna do what I want, and that did happen all the time.
Yeah.
But I started to find like that's when I started building my own business.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like I can do this. And the thing is like once I separate the emotion out of what the, like it's a meeting between two people. I'm a grown man. He's a grown man. Nobody's better than the other.
Right.
Besides the labels that I place on him.
Absolutely.
So if I take the emotion out of the situation, there is no problem.
Right.
But for me, you know, especially at first, I'm way better at it now.
Right.
But, you know, I was kind of like just thrown in the fire.
Sure.
You know, and there's two ways to do it.
Yeah.
You can go to therapy, get coaching and things like that, which absolutely you should, or get thrown in the fire. And actually, you should probably do both.
I think it's all necessary. My experience, so here's my experience with that, personally and professionally, right? There are things when I'll get a client, somebody that I'm working with, and they'll and sometimes I'll see how much action I can get them in before they hit a wall. Right? This isn't how I always do it, but with certain clients, I'll see how much action I can get them into before they hit a wall, before they like stop taking the action, or their limiting belief gets in where they're not taking the action that they said they would. Once we hit that wall, then I know that deeper belief system has to be accessed,
right?
And we need to go in there, right? Because here's the thing: you can absolutely, I'll say, heal or create a different experience of yourself by taking action that you wouldn't in the past, right?
Yeah.
Now, but what you spoke to before is you've been taking a lot of action, but you still have the experience of the anxiety, the fear, and the want or need to avoid.
Yeah, right? and the need to people please.
Right. And so think about how much bandwidth that actually takes up in your actual experience of your life.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So I think it's fantastic that you're out there doing the thing regardless.
Right.
Right. So yeah, absolutely. Like feel the fear, do it anyway. Right. And go through that. But if your experience on the inside, well, let me ask you this. Would you like to have a different experience on the inside where like that's not taking up so much bandwidth?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then that's really,
I think anybody would,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. Well, yeah, most of the time I would think so, right? So that's really like about addressing like the root trauma there. So like let's say this past experience with the client, when you recognized when you were looking for the back door, right? What were you experiencing inside physically?
Yeah. So I'd say the main spots where I feel anxiety is I get like chest tightness.
Yeah.
Heart starts to beat faster, and like honestly, even this is crazy, but even sometimes I get a little bit lightheaded.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm breathing a little heavier. But usually it's like all in my chest around my heart area, and then fast beating adrenaline. It's it's like being like a caveman running from a tiger when I'm going to have a talk with like a
So
5'3"
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I mean I didn't really when I got into working with a therapist and even my sponsor to a great extent, that became a lot clearer. And I also like through that I tend to like motor mouth as well.
Start talking fast.
Yeah. And I've worked a lot about that with my sponsor. He said, sometimes, man, like you don't have to say anything, pause.
Yeah.
Think about what you're going to say, but you don't have to like, because when you do that, like it takes away your credibility. You start looking like you don't know what you're doing. And my former boss, he talked with me about that too. He's like, you look nervous.
Yeah.
Like, well, I fucking am nervous. Yeah. So out of curiosity, like for me, not to derail what we were saying, but if you're coaching somebody and they're having these like recurring, what do you tell them like when they start feeling that stuff? Like, let's say there's no moment to
great question.
Pause
Yeah. So there's two things, right? There's one, the more you can notice the physical sensation. So your experience at any time, right, is your thoughts, feelings, physical sensations. Okay. So in the beginning with this deep-seated stuff, we really want to build our awareness around what this thing looks like. Okay. How we're feeling towards it, how we're relating to it. And then once I get a person to begin to see, we're in session, we're going to go in and we're actually going to like really see what's going on there. There's probably going to be a lot of catharsis that happens. So I will use a technique that I've been trained in, right? It's called, it's a form of shadow work through a modality of EFT, right? So I'll use some tapping, but then statements, and we'll get into like your deeper subconscious and we'll kind of see what's there. And so until the needs get nurtured inside, right? So there's a need there and there was a need that wasn't met there originally.
Totally.
Right? So like at some point in time, you had something happen where it was way too much for your nervous system to handle. And not just was it way too much for your nervous system to handle, but there was nobody to support you or comfort you, or what they call co-regulate back to a baseline. Like, hey, everything's going to be okay, man. And like, till what, like, we're like, if you ever see a kid fall, right? And then they're like about to start crying and they look and they see like none of the adults are panicked and everybody's like, oh, it's okay. And they hold the kid, or the kid starts crying and the mother just holds it. The mother doesn't match the kid's
oh my God, are you okay?
Right. The mother is just that calm, right, source of nurture, and the kid just comes back down to baseline, and then 2 seconds later he's out there playing.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally.
So something in your experience happened where that didn't take place.
Yeah.
Right? You may know the original point of origin or not.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. For sure.
And so it's about understanding the needs that weren't met. Sometimes there's some reparenting on the inside that needs to have happen.
Yep.
But it's about addressing the needs that weren't met. It may be some venting that needs to happen, and not venting from you here now. There might be venting from like parts of you that are fractured off a long time ago that need to express. They need to express what was there. And once they express, right, and we can start to bring some acceptance in there.
Yeah.
Right. As we can start to bring some acceptance, we can start to bring some nurturing in there. Okay. And then once we've sort of taken care of the part that's in the need that's been unmet, then we can start to look at repatterning. Then we can start to look at, well, okay, what does this get to look like moving forward? Once we create enough safety in those old fractured parts, right, then we can start to look at repatterning.
Right.
Right. And building some trust and some currency in a new future as opposed to this past experience. Does that make sense?
It does. But about the venting thing, you know, when I was studying psychology, most of the data, and this is, 2010, 2011, venting from a data perspective doesn't really help. And personally, for me, I've noticed that when I vent about things, usually what happens is I just get stuck in the same pattern of it.
Right.
And then other people that are around, the commiserating friend, you're like, well, look, I'm just calling you to vent. And then after, I'm always like, well, I should feel better, but I don't. I'm like, I'm still just pissed off about it.
Right. So pay attention to the language that I used, not you venting now. But when we would get to venting, it would be the part of you that's actually threatened. Right?
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So,
gotcha.
So there are internal family systems is a fantastic system of therapy that is used. So basically, you ever have conflicting ideas about there's a part of you, right, that is like, I hate that fucking bitch, and then there's another part of you is like, no, you shouldn't feel like that.
All day long, every day.
So
I always have those going back and forth.
Notice there's two of them, and they each have a pretty valid voice within.
Sure.
And they create a conflict.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as long as, imagine we have a bunch of these things in conflict with each other all the time.
Yeah, it's pretty
consciously and unconsciously.
Pretty damn hard to get anything done.
So we would want to get to the parts that are the one that is frozen, right? What does that guy have to say?
Yes.
So I'm imagining that when you're venting, we're not deeply accessing that frozen part.
No, very true.
Okay.
Very true. And the reason being is and that makes a lot more sense now. The deeply frozen part is there, and it makes you almost at red line all the time. And so when you vent about stuff, it's like somebody took my parking place at work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But really, it's not that big a deal. It's just masking over all of this pain that's been there for years.
Exactly. And when I say vent, it's like sometimes it's just the
letting pain out.
Letting the pain out, right? It's not complaining.
Right.
Gotcha. It's letting the pain out. So thank you for having me clarify that. Because that's important. And you know what's interesting, man? It's like I work with therapists. Like I have therapists as clients.
Yeah.
And I have clients that have therapists. And I've gotten to this place, and this might piss some people off, and that's okay. There are some amazing therapists out there. And there are a lot of people that just listen and take your money.
For sure.
It's a weird. So I think the way a lot of therapists are trained, they are not capable or trained to take somebody through this stuff.
Well, I mean, they're also being told this is the school of thought.
Yeah.
Anything else is pseudoscience.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to lose your. I mean, it's all.
So
you know what I mean?
They got a lot of handcuffs on them and
totally
stuff like
valid.
that. I think therapy is a great place to start for a person that has. Man, it's better to be getting on the road, at least talking to somebody, right? Like, man, so many people don't have anybody to talk to about the stuff they got going on inside.
Yeah. I think everybody should have some sort of therapy.
Yeah. So just having somebody that you can keep it 100 with, right? Like I think that's really just talk about the stuff you got going on, and have somebody listening from a completely objective place, from a completely neutral place. I think that's fantastic. It is also limited into what you can do with it, right? So, and I'll have people that are stuck in these lifelong patterns, and they tell me, yeah, but I'm going to therapy. Right? Because they're taught therapy is
will fix you.
And it's like, no, dude, therapy is a start. Yep. It is a start. I really don't believe, except for there's some exceptional people out there where there are exceptions to the rule. I don't believe therapy is the thing that can bring you through to the other side with some of this more deeply entrenched stuff. And it's just been my experience over and over and over again. And just the experience that's been reported back to me is that therapy will bring out the story, right? And there are some therapists that can see the story. They can give you some clarity on the story. They can have you understand the story better.
Yep, totally.
But if there's no repatterning, if the needs that weren't met don't get met, right? If there's not some sort of dealing with those deeper, more fragmented parts.
Yeah, I mean,
you're staying in the story, bro.
Totally. I had a therapist that from anybody that I know would probably have looked at this lady and been like, bro, this lady's nuts. Like, she's talking about auras, and she's like, talking about, being able to interpret God's voice in her head and write. Like, she was, what a lot of people might consider a quack,
A little woo woo.
very, very much so. But this lady, like, we did EMDR, we did ego state therapy, we did hypnosis. This lady, like, got me to admit and start talking about, like, got me to pull up memories that I didn't even know were there.
Right.
Through doing some of this stuff that, more of a straight laced talk therapy, it never would have come out because I didn't even remember it. Right. And so that lady was like, I mean, just blew me away. But I think a lot of people would be, because there's that like dichotomy, like, well, that's pseudoscience, that's not supported. And,
it's, I've come to a place just in my own life where cool data and science is fantastic. Right. But there's so much that's unaccounted for within that. Like, I have friends that are in the medical industry and we'll be talking about things like there's a healing peptide called BPC 157, right?
Okay.
And you can, the reports of people that take it is like, man, this stuff can actually work miracles. Like it does some really good stuff. And then I have friends that are very, they are medical professionals. Well, the data on it and like they're kind of like roll their eyes at it. But then like you literally hearing all these people have success stories with it. So it's like, well, something's fucking happening here, right? And I think when they will only take like information from certain authorities.
Yeah, totally. And that's what it is.
And that's the end all be all of how they can see the world. I think that's super limiting.
It is.
I think it's a really limiting way to experience things. I'm not saying to ignore science completely or ignore data completely. Making it the end all be all, I think it closes you off to possibility.
Yeah, it's just like the dogmatic nature of things that we talk about.
Yeah.
I got my younger brother is a genius. He's 23. He is is he 20? He's 23 now. I can't even believe it. He's an aerospace engineer and he's a materialist. I'm not a materialist. I'm, a non-dualist, which is more, but he's like, I know all about quantum mechanics and quantum physics. And so we get into these talks about this stuff. And he's just totally like, he can't fathom.
No,
he cannot understand like when I tell him like, you and I are literally the same thing. We're not different at all. Like I'm no different than this plant right here.
Right.
He's like, no, that's just not how, because he's bought into the materialist paradigm. Yeah. Because that's what he was taught in school. And hey, maybe that's what he believes. That's fine. But
that's fine.
But if you're only like, I will only look at this one path to fix this issue, and I will not entertain anything else because I was told that it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then, and it's fine. Like I think, I'm always curious, like with those particular people, like wonder how happy or fulfilled they are. How much, and if you are, then great,
then wonderful.
If not, then I think on top of all these other, I think the spiritual component to things is really important too. And guys, when I say spiritual, I'm not talking about crystals and man buns.
That's not true. Before we got in here, when I came in here, Eric had like a bunch of candles lit and he was saying mantras.
If that's your fucking jam, cool. You know what I mean? But this sort of I think just a relationship with the infinite, I think is really important because the work that I do is fantastic. It's awesome. It fucking literally changes people's lives. Like just sort of a brag, but I don't give a fuck. I had a client that was a therapist, right, and been a therapist for a long time. And I remember she said to me, "Man, I feel like I've done more work in the past 2 weeks than I've done in the past 20 years of therapy." Right.
Wow. That coming from a therapist.
Yeah. So, and I could understand what she's talking, because it's like, dude, I'm going right to it with you. I'm hands on, right? And it's like, and I'm going to hold you accountable, and I'm going to call bullshit where I see bullshit. And that's like another thing that therapists may or may not do. You know what I mean? Is hold people accountable. Yeah. Like, all right, time's up. See you next week. And, that type of stuff. So I think all that's really important. And, we're dealing with the mind, and we're freeing up these emotions, and it absolutely can change people's lives. As long as we're in the mind, though, we're going to suffer, right? And so that's where like some of my spiritual beliefs of like actually like doing the work in meditation to separate from the mind, right? So that I'm not bought into the to the dualist
Yep.
concept
Yep. I do the same thing.
of living. And I think like, man, that's where a lot of my peace comes from. Yeah, all this work that I do creates a tremendous amount of
Right.
peace, right? But it's the work that I do spiritually every day, the time that I spend in meditation, the time that I spend writing, in self-examination, right? And really going within to create more, like looking where I'm not free and why am I not free? What belief systems am I buying into that are creating this lack of freedom, or where am I buying into this sense of separation, right? So
Yeah, which separation causes anxiety.
yeah,
And to your point, especially about the data thing, which, here's what trumps data: direct experience.
Yeah.
And that's why, when like I've talked with people about being a non-dualist, and that's ridiculous. And like, why do you think that? I say, because I've directly experienced it.
Right.
And I've directly experienced it through deep meditation. I'm a avid meditator. I'm got a little off course, but I'm getting back on. But at one point, I mean, I could meditate for an hour.
yeah,
And I'm not talking about putting on a track from Calm.
Right.
I mean, nothing.
yeah,
Right. And I've had experiences that have shown me that like I'm not separate from anything else.
Yeah.
And describe it to me. I can't describe it.
It's because like, it's like putting words to these things that are beyond the mind.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, and I get how hard that can be for some people. So, and maybe not everybody's meant to wake up to that in this iteration of their lives, and that's cool. I think what you said is actually one of the things that you said is really interesting, right? It's like, I think getting into meditation is really vital and important. I think just for people in general. And you're like, putting on these apps, and like I have a thing about that too. I think those apps and stuff, they're cool. I think if you need to get an introduction, to
good for getting started.
right? I think they're great, but one of the problems that I've noticed when people start meditating, or when somebody tells them that it would be helpful for them to meditate, and they're like, oh, I'm trying to meditate and blah blah blah, and it's not working, or I'm not good at it. I'm meditating as a calming tool, right? Yeah. It's like calm may be a byproduct of meditation. It is not the point of meditation.
No,
right?
Not at all.
And you'll hear many schools of thought and I'm not going to sit here and say I have the one and only version of what meditation is. That would be ridiculous, right? But one of the things I find helpful, right, as a context, right, or a framework to understand about what could be really useful about meditation, is understanding the nature of the mind, right, and to see and be clear about the nature of the mind. So when I'm in meditation, I'm watching oftentimes this circus go on.
Totally.
And noticing my judgments, noticing how I attach myself to these stories, and how I look at them like balloons, right, with strings. And if I grab onto one of them, it pulls me, and I go for a ride until I let it go, right? And once I let go of the balloon, I'm back, and I can see the balloon going. And then there's many more balloons that are going to come. And as I sit there, quiet, breathing, and just noticing, the balloons start to get less and less.
Yep.
Right. And sometimes there's no balloons. Right.
Exactly. But you can't force the balloons to stop.
No. You cannot force it. Right.
See, that's what I see people getting hung up. They're like, "Well, I'm trying to not think." I'm like, that's impossible.
Just notice your thinking.
Notice it.
Right.
Let it in.
Observe.
Let it out.
Can you repeatedly go back to observing? Right.
Yeah, Eckhart Tolle talks about becoming the watcher.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Very, very, helpful way to look at it as well.
Yep.
Observe. Notice, right? Notice your need to influence the thoughts.
Yep.
Where is that need coming from?
Right.
Notice that need. Follow that need. See where it goes, right? Like to get a better glimpse of really what's going on here, and to be able to step back from that.
Yeah, and look at it.
And it's like, oh, I'm noticing that there's this voice in here that's actually trying to control. Well, where the fuck is that voice? If I'm noticing this voice, where is this voice coming from?
Yeah, because it ain't me.
It ain't me. I'm noticing it. How am I hearing the sound?
Yep. And then whatever the voice comes up, then you get a feeling from it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then, it's super interesting. I love the balloon metaphor.
Yeah.
By the way, I mean, I think that's really, really good. That definitely makes that kind of crystal clear and helps people understand a little bit.
Oh, dude, you grab the balloon, and you're like, oh, here we
go.
Right?
And who knows how long you're going to be
dude,
on
that balloon could take you for hours if you're unconscious to it, right?
Yep.
So the thing is to become conscious of my thoughts, right? When you're back to the original story that we started the podcast with, when you got that initial call,
went into survival mode,
unconscious,
mm-hmm.
right?
Totally.
Not conscious of, yeah, I'm recognizing that this is a reaction due to a traumatic event that I experienced when I was a child.
no, right.
And oh, I can see how that's influencing my current
Yeah,
moment.
and it's not true.
Yeah, right.
Right? It's
Yeah.
not. I mean, there's so many people that I've done work for, and they're like, "Dude, this is great."
Right.
But I'm sitting there like,
interpretation.
this one person said they didn't like one thing because of a miscommunication, and so now when I leave, I'm like, I should probably just give up. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So the avoidance stuff can look a bunch of different ways, and I do want to just explain this to the listeners or the viewers because I think it's helpful. Like, so okay, let's say you're getting started on a new project,
Mm-hmm.
or you're having a hard time getting started because I'm avoiding the difficulty of the inertia of getting started on something. Like,
Yes.
get in this boulder, moving.
That's
And
painful.
it's painful, and those initial failures. There's a discomfort that can come with these initial failures, and it's oftentimes this sort of energy of like trudging through mud,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sticky, and it takes a little while to gain momentum. And because I'm avoiding that anticipated beginning point, I don't get started,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or I'm
Yeah.
anticipating a particular failure with something that I don't know how to do so well,
Yeah.
so I don't even get started.
Yeah, I think a lot of procrastinators aren't lazy; they're anxious.
They're anxious.
They're avoidant.
They're anxious, they're avoidant, and they're unclear, right? So I forget who said this, but I found this to be true. A lot of avoidance, right, and anxiousness comes down to some deep unconscious fears,
Mhm.
right, or a lack of know-how. Right?
Yeah.
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 Right? So if you have know-how, right, then the action steps are clear.
Mhm.
When the action steps are clear, then you can take the action.
Yep.
Right. So clarity will do wonders to resolve a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
When a person can get clarity, right, on how and what to do with certain things and what the next steps are, it really does wonders for anxiety.
Yeah, that's why talking with somebody like you that can systemize some of this stuff.
And that's it, right?
Systemizing it, right?
So the number one thing I do, I fucking said this on a million podcasts, but the number one thing that I do when I'm working with somebody, or even just the people that I participate in their lives, like it doesn't have to be a client, but friends, is support them in creating clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get real clear on what we're dealing with. We might even talk about why we're dealing with it, right? And how to begin moving through and past this.
Yes.
Right? So like that clarity is, well, what it's valuable, but why is it valuable? Because what do we do without that? If we can't see it, right? And we don't know what we're dealing with, then we're definitely not going to have a plan to move through it. We're just going to be living life very circumstantially, right? It's like,
in response mode.
in response mode. One thing that kills me, right? It's like somebody will talk about this place that they want to go or this thing that they want to do, and they say one day.
Yeah.
And when somebody says one day, I can pretty much guarantee it's more than likely not going to happen.
Yeah, in a decade, they'll be like, one of these days,
someday,
Yep.
someday.
For sure.
Right? It's like, well, why not fucking make a plan, bro?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Make a plan.
Make a clear let's get a clear idea of this thing and what it would take to do that, right? But that would require us to get out of the momentum of just unconsciously being stuck in the story, right?
Right. Well, and going on that too, it's funny to me, like when, being in the marketing industry, there's a lot of people, like a lot of content out there, and people are seeing, oh, like I got an 8-figure business and build your business to $100K a month in less than 30 days. And like, I always tell people, and be very wary of anything like that, because the thing is like, a lot of these people, if they're legit, you're seeing the end result of decades of work. Or maybe they lucked out. Maybe they had a great idea, somebody funded it, and they're like, boom, which is awesome. But once the other thing is, when you get into your plan, you're going to get knocked back. You're going to fall down, and it's going to feel shitty, and it's going to feel crappy. And when you can learn, like I love how Gary Vee talks about this, Gary Vaynerchuk. He'll say, I get up every day and I'm ready and willing for everything to go wrong that day. Yeah. And I do that every single day. Like I'm anticipating it's going to go wrong. And like some people will be like, well, no, you should anticipate, be positive, because I am positive, because I love, I've done this so much. I've done so much work around building and failing that I love it now.
Right.
And like that to me,
Well,
like
he trusts himself, right?
he trusts
What
himself.
I hear in that is he's built up equity with himself.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That he trusts himself to be able to handle the challenges. So for a given period of time, right, what I'm hearing from him in that, or what I interpret from that, right, is that he's done the hard thing. He's not ran from the challenge.
No.
And got it done so much so that he enjoys it.
Yep.
Right. Well, yeah, he enjoys the feeling of overcoming. And
yes,
like, here's the thing though, bro, we actually need challenge in our lives to be fulfilled. It's actually the thing that fulfills us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Human beings in general, we derive not only a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment from challenge, but a lot of the meaning that gets created in and around our lives is through the challenges that we faced. A lot of our identity gets created around the challenges that we've either overcome or haven't overcome.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you see somebody oftentimes that is confident or fulfilled, good chance they've met some challenges. Right. Case in point, how many like rich kids do like, you know, I just think of these like kids in North County, you know, San Diego, that are dropping dead from fentanyl left and right from rich homes. They're from fucking like wealthy families, right? No lack of struggle. Everything's given to them, right?
Yeah.
Not a strong sense of purpose or meaning. Okay. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. There's a lot of discomfort that comes with that. There's a lot of
I was just going to say, like, I love that because I think that there's something to be said for having your base needs yanked out from you.
Sure.
You know, you got kids like that like I had a buddy in high school who was like, well, I don't need to do good in school because like my dad's just going to give me his company.
Right.
So, you know, he was just a fuck off, which, you know,
happens, dude, right?
That's fine. Like whatever. But, you know, when you have, you know, somebody like the bass player in my band, my best friend, Drew, who grew up, you know, left home at 16 and, you know, he makes over 6 figures now. He's educated, he's doing very well, but nobody helped that guy.
Right.
Nobody did. And, you know, like he developed a sense of like struggle is my survival, which is not a good place to be in.
Right.
But that like now that his base needs are met, he applies that to like work and projects and things like that, and he was able to fend for himself, so he doesn't have that like I need somebody to provide something for me. You know, and like I feel like you're when you talk about your story growing up, some of the base needs that may not have been met at home growing up, you know, and then going through the alcoholism and the drug addiction. I mean, I'd be willing to bet that there's a lot of nuggets where you're like, oh my God, like I gotta do this.
Totally. Yeah. So I don't think there's a way, right? I think it's not the right way to raise a kid is to not just meet any of their needs, right?
Of course not.
Right?
So, yeah, there's a balance here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying tell your kid you're not going to feed him, okay?
So I think our struggle is valuable.
Yeah.
And also knowing that we're loved is valuable.
Sure.
Right. And some of us didn't get that, right? Or didn't feel that or didn't experience that.
Right.
And it took us some work to start to begin to create that in our lives, right? What I'm saying is if you're a parent and you're doing well, right, maybe it's worth examining, like, does my child have enough struggle, enough challenge in their life that they're not going to become fragile?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And am I regularly being intentional about making sure that they know how to earn things?
Yeah.
That not earn love or applause, but how to earn things, how to work hard for something, how to make mistakes. Does my child equipped to handle failure?
Yeah.
Right. Like those would be things I think that are really important to developing a strong child. Okay?
Yeah.
If our job as a parent is to make sure that these children are able to not just survive, right, but thrive. If like we want to arm them or make them capable, right? We want to equip them with the tools that will be necessary for them to create a life that's fulfilling.
Totally.
Create a life that's fulfilling. We can't just give them a life that's fulfilling.
No.
The idea you're going to give somebody a fulfilling life is a thing that's actually going to cripple them.
Yeah.
Right.
If it's done too much. Giving.
Give them a fulfilling life. You can't
Well, yeah.
give,
Well, you can't. I don't think you can
can't.
give anybody
Exactly.
a fulfilling life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the
They gotta
distinction.
figure
That's
that
the
out.
distinction that I want to make. So are we going to equip them with the tools necessary,
Right.
that they can create a fulfilling life? That, I think, is what the job of a caretaker is when they're in the role of a parent. Yeah, love the kid. That's a necessary part of being
They
lovable.
need to feel safe. They need to feel loved.
Safety and a certain amount of lovability is part of having a life that's fulfilling, knowing that you're worthy of connection.
Yeah.
Right. Having that as an innate part of you is great. I had to work for that. I had to like really go out and like, man, I felt so separate from the world for so long. So,
Right. And my point wasn't to say don't do that to your kids. My point was I'll bet that there was a silver lining in you going through that.
You get to make it. Right. Yeah.
But let me give you a real world example with my daughter. So, I tend to be more on the spoil my child side than the disciplinarian side. And, I've worked on that. But in the process of working on that, one of the things that I did is I wasn't taught about money as a kid. And I wanted to teach her about how money works, right? Now, so we had this system where she would earn points for certain things. It started with easy things, brushing your teeth, making your bed, that kind of stuff, right? And then it got more into behaviors, not arguing, stuff like that. But I started to teach her, she would say, okay, well, so 1 star is worth $2. And then we'd go and she'd want to buy something. I'd be like, okay, well, let's look at how many stars you have. I'd be like, okay, you got this many stars.
Cool.
You can't afford that right now. But I will let you borrow 1 star from me.
Nice.
So I'm going to lend it to you, but then you owe me that star back. And you're going to owe me that star plus another one.
Right.
Do you want to do? So I'm teaching her about lending out money with interest.
Very cool, man.
Right. And so we started doing that. And now, like, she's 7. I got her own.
She's got you in debt.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Right. But I got her own Venmo card.
Nice.
Now, technically, it's mine.
Right.
But it's got her name on it.
Yeah.
It's pink.
Cool.
I attach it to her tablet. If she wants to buy stuff, she wants to do stuff. Hey, how much money have you earned?
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
now,
beautiful,
of
man.
course, there are extenuating circumstances. I am, I'll take her out and do stuff. If she really wants something, it's like, all right, fine, maybe I'll cave. But for the most part, she understands this is my money.
Yeah.
I'm not spending dad's money.
Right.
Dad's funding
That's
that.
beautiful,
But I
man.
got to do stuff in order to get that.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. I hope some parents are listening to that and take some inspiration from that. I think that's really cool. Yeah, I think we're gonna leave it there today. I enjoyed that, and thank you for the conversation. And yeah, guys, these are everything that we said here is experience. It's stuff that's been put into practical application. If there's any questions, any comments, any people that want to be like, yeah, well, you're not a fucking therapist, and cool, welcome all the comments.
Throw it in the comments.
Yeah. We welcome the dialogue for sure. Always. So again, guys, if you like the episode, if you like the stuff that we're putting out, you dig the message, like, share, subscribe, all those things. Let your friends know that we exist. Really just want to get the message that we're kicking out to as many people as possible.
Oh, and real quick before we go, you're available to talk to people like in a one-on-one sense for like a quick little period. If somebody's really interested, how do they?
Oh yeah, they can just go to my website, ericuresk.com, right? And they can book a 15-minute consultation call.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Cool. All right. We'll see you guys next time.